Today I'm going to read Rosie Revere, Engineer by Andrea Beatty, illustrated by David Roberts. As I read this, I'm going to do a think aloud and I'm going to talk to you about what's going on in the book and we're going to identify some rhyming words. This is the story of Rosie Revere, who dreamed of becoming a great engineer. In Lila Greer's classroom at Blue River Creek, young Rosie sat shyly, not daring to speak. So there are two sets of rhyming words on this page. Rhyming words are usually at the end of a line. So in this example, Revere rhymes with engineer and creek rhymes with speak. So the pattern is A, B, B. But when no one saw her, she peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer stash. And late at night, Rosie rolled up her sleeves and built in her hideaway under the eaves. So again, A, trash and stash, B, sleeves and eaves. What is Rosie doing here? She peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer stash. So she's going through the trash to find things to use to build. Alone in her attic, the moon high above, dear Rosie made gadgets and gizmos she loved. And when she grew sleepy, she hid her machines far under the bed where they'd never be seen. So look at all this cool stuff she's building. She's gotten things, probably she's bought some of these things, but we know some of the things came from the trash. And she likes to build and explore and invent. When Rosie was young, she had not been so shy. She worked with her hair swooping over one eye and made fine inventions for uncles and aunts, a hot dog dispenser, and helium pants. So this is telling us that when she was little, she used to invent all kinds of things and she wasn't shy at all. The uncle she loved most was zookeeper Fred. She made him a hat to keep snakes off his head. So why would he need a hat to keep snakes off his head? Because he's a zookeeper. From parts of a fan and some cheddar cheese spray, which everyone knows keeps the pythons away. So here's the hat, and it's got cheddar cheese spray, and it's going to keep the snakes away from Uncle Fred. So here's Uncle Fred. He's got a python on his head now. And what is he doing? He's laughing at her. Okay, we're going to talk about inference here. If you worked really hard to build something for someone you really loved, and then they laughed at you, how would that make you feel? And then how does Rosie look? Sad and embarrassed? I think so. Let's see what it says. And when it was finished, young Rosie was proud. But Fred slapped his knee and chuckled out loud. He laughed till he wheezed and his eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who stood there embarrassed, perplexed, and dismayed, so very confused and embarrassed. She looked at the cheese hat and then looked away. I love it, Fred hooted. Oh, truly I do. But Rosie Revere knew that could not be true, so she stuck the cheese hat on the back of her shelf, and after that day, she kept her dreams to herself. So let's talk about this a second. He's laughing, but he's saying that he loved it. I think, but it really hurt her feelings. He probably did love it, but not in the same way that she did. She really thought that she was building something to help him, and he probably more thought it was cute and funny, but it really hurt her feelings. And it says, she stuck the cheese hat on the back of her shelf, and after that day, kept her dreams to herself. So he kind of broke her heart and made her not want to invent anymore. And that's how it went until one autumn day, her oldest relation showed up for a stay. So one day in the fall, her oldest relation, which is Aunt Rose here, showed up to visit her. Her great-great-aunt Rose was a true dynamo who'd worked building airplanes a long time ago. And we're going to talk about this. This is Rosie the Riveter, which is an example from when ladies came in to help build the planes. Her great-great-aunt Rose was a true dynamo who'd worked building airplanes a long time ago. She told Rosie tales of the things she had done and the goals she had checked off her list one by one. So Aunt Rose is encouraging her and telling her, hey, don't give up. You can still invent things. She gave a sad smile as she looked at the sky. The only thrill left on my list is to fly. I'm going to read that again. She gave a sad smile as she looked at the sky. The only thing left on my list is to fly. But the time never lingers as long as it seems, and I'll chalk this one up to an old lady's dreams. So the only thing that Aunt Rose wants to do is to fly a plane. That night, as Rosie lay wide awake in bed, a daring idea crept into her head. Again, rhyming, bed, head. Could she build a gizmo to help her aunt fly? She looked at the cheese hat and said, no, not I. But questions are tricky and some hold on tight, and this one kept Rosie awake through the night. So when dawn approached and the red streaks lit the sky, young Rosie knew just how to make her aunt fly. So Rosie wants to help her aunt fly. She worked and she worked till the day was half gone, and then she hauled her cheese copter out onto the lawn to give her invention a test just to see the ridiculous flop that it might turn out to be. So she's invented something to help her aunt fly. Strapped into the cockpit, she flipped on the switch. The hella cheese copter sputtered and twitched. It floated a moment and whirled round and round. Then it froze for a heartbeat, and it crashed to the ground. Then Rosie heard laughter and turned round to see the old woman was laughing and slapping her knee. She laughed till she wheezed and her eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere. So this is the same reaction initially that Uncle Fred had. But let's see what happens next. Who thought, oh no, not ever again will I try to build something to sputter or spin or build with a lever or switch or a gear, and never will I be a great engineer. So she built the hella cheese copter, and it did fly for a second, and then it crashed. And here on this page, I'm going to inference that someone's laughing at her again, and her face is red. She's feeling embarrassed. But wait, look at the next page. She turned around to leave, but then Great Aunt Rose grabbed hold of young Rosie and pulled her in close and hugged her and kissed her and started to cry. You did it! Hooray! It's a perfect first try. This great flop is over. It's time for the next. Young Rosie was baffled, embarrassed, perplexed. I failed, said dear Rosie. It's just made of trash. Didn't you see the cheese copter crashed? Yes, said her great aunt. It crashed, that is true, but first, it did just what it needed to do. Before it crashed, Rosie, before that, it flew. So the cool thing about rhyme is you can kind of predict what's going to happen. I knew it was going to say flew because it had said true up here. All right, so on this page, Rosie was feeling very embarrassed, and she felt like that Aunt Rose was laughing at her. But then we realize on this page, Aunt Rose is actually laughing out of excitement because the hella cheese copter flew for just a second. And she said it was a perfect first try. We just got to keep working. Your brilliant first flop was a raging success. Come on, let's get busy. And on to the next. She handed a notebook to Rosie Revere, who smiled at her aunt as it all became clear. Life might have failures, but this was not it. The only true failure can come if you quit. So they worked till the sun sneaked away to its bed. I love that line. What does that mean? They worked till the sun sneaked away to its bed. Till the sun went down, yes. Aunt Rose tied her headscarf around Rosie's head and sent her to sleep with a smile ear to ear, to dream the bold dreams of a great engineer. At Blue River Creek, all the kids in grade 2 build gizmos and gadgets and doohickeys too. With each perfect failure, they all stand and cheer, but none quite as proudly as Rosie Revere. Isn't that a great story? What do you think the author's trying to teach you in this story? Never to give up. I think so too. All right, we're going to stop.